in Colombo. And this morning, NEWSLINE continues its quest to find answers to the greatest financial scam ever inflicted upon independent Sri Lanka, also known sometimes fondly as the bond scam. This morning, we have got here with us a person who's very familiar with the subject and who has spent virtually a lifetime working at the central bank, retiring gracefully as in a position as a senior deputy governor. He's right here with us, Dr. W.A. Wijewardena. Very good morning to you,
Very good
Doctor.
morning, Faraz.
Thank you very much. Finally, after so much of battles, we've had a forensic report, the forensic audit into the issuance of Treasury bonds. 4.5 years later, 300 million nearly later. What is your initial take on this?
Well, Faraz, now the particular forensic audit exercise was done by the Monetary Board of the Central Bank, because there was a remark, I don't say it's a recommendation, in the report of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the bond scam from 2015 onwards, conducting a forensic audit may be appropriate. That is how the report had worded.
Yes, that was to establish, if I recall correctly, to find out the exact loss to
not
the state.
Exact loss, not the exact loss, because there had been some, some people had been arguing even at that time, specifically the government party that was in power, that even prior to 2015 there had been some irregularities in the issue of the Treasury bonds, mainly in the form of private placements, the direct placements. So as a result, the Commission had just made a remark that it may be appropriate to conduct a forensic audit exercise. So this is the reason for the Monetary Board to do this. But of course, the Commission had said that it should have been done from 2018 to 2000 onwards. But the Central Bank's Monetary Board, in its own sincerity, it had said, okay, we will do it from 2002 onwards. And they had actually called for international proposals from audit firms. It had been, the selection of this BDO India and KPMG India had been done in a very transparent manner, and I have no any objection or reservation about it. The selection had been done by a cabinet appointed tender board, and they were given the assignment to do the forensic audit exercise from 2002 onwards, after Sri Lanka went for this the digital recording of the scriptless securities, government securities. So, but unfortunately for them, they didn't have any data relating to 2002 to 2005. So as a result, it has actually strangely coincided with the period where Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa was the president, from 2015 to 2018.
Was that a convenient coincidence?
I don't know, because this shouldn't have been done, by reference to any political regime. Because for 2002 to 2004, it was Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe who was the Prime Minister, and Mrs. Chandrika Bandaranaike was the President. And so it would have been much more revealing to the members of the public had the exercise been done from 2002 onwards to identify where these gaps had taken place. But my thing is that initial reaction for us is that they have come up with 5 reports, done a lots of work in trying to digging out the basics of the bond issues during 2005 onwards till March 2016, and lots of good information has also been presented by them, specifically with respect to post 2015 bond scams. For example, the forensic audit has revealed how the one particular primary dealer, we can now I think mention the primary dealer's name now, it's PTL, Perpetual Treasuries, and they have bought at a very low price in the bond auctions, not only the one which had been referred to as the bond scam in on 27th February 2015.
Even 6 or 7 others.
Throughout at a very low price. Then immediately they have sold it to some of the other primary dealers, and from those primary dealers, those bonds have ended up with the Employees Provident Fund at a very high price.
Right. Now, in one instance, we can mention this, PABC, there is some suggestion in the reports to say that that was sort of front
running, yes. It's called front running.
Yes. So, how does one define that? Is it, did they make more than the normal margin, or did they make the small margin?
Front running is that you try to make a very short term market for yourself, so that you get the bonds. You get the bonds. And those bonds are then assigned to your master.
Right.
So you are front running for one particular person.
Okay. So they were, in short, what you're saying is, if this is the case, the primary dealer was front running for the master as the man who won the bond in the first place.
Bond in the first place, and then you sell it to him immediately.
I see.
So that's called, so that in the bond auction you don't find.
Is that illegal?
Well, there is nothing illegal about it, but it's an unethical practice. Immoral practice.
Is such unethical practice not envisaged in the Monetary Law Act and in the registered stocks and shares?
Once far as when the central bank comes to know about it, they will have to immediately be strict on it. They will have to pull up the particular primary dealer and ask him not to resort to this kind of malpractices, because it gives a wrong signal.
Under the rules, what happens?
Even under the rules, now there are no specific rules banning it.
Right.
Prohibiting it.
But it's unethical.
It's unethical.
Because it eventually impinges on the market?
Not only the markets, it gives a wrong signal to other primary dealers that they also can resort to this kind of practice and manipulate the market operations.
Right. Now there's many questions. One is that the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, they stated that the losses to, again it said, subject to working out properly, but approximately 8,500 million, that's 8.5 billion with a B, was the loss to the EPF. Now, that's on the one side they said that. They also pointed out that subject to a magisterial action and decision, that under the law or under the rules, the fine for that would be twice that amount.
That is under the exactly act.
Yes, under the act it would be twice the amount. Therefore, there was a legitimate expectation in our eyes and eyes of the public that whoever was responsible would have to be fined, or could be fined up to twice, which is 17 billion. They also, the Presidential Commission was rather helpful. They held Governor Mahendran fully responsible for the sharing of sensitive information. And they also said that the principal beneficiary was Perpetual Treasuries, a company owned by the governor's son-in-law's family. Now that's on the one side. But then we look at these books here, all these 5 volumes here, and in this forensic audit, it suggests somewhere in book 4 that Arjun Aloysius, that there is no evidence to link him. But the rest of this forensic audit also identifies the link, the nexus between Mahendran, Perpetual Treasuries, Pan Asia Bank, and so on and so forth. So what's the truth? Is Mr. Aloysius out in the clear?
No. I think the forensic auditors had also warned Faraz that the 5 reports will have to be read in totality, rather than by picking up certain
in piecemeal.
Right. And what has actually been reported there is that based on the evidence from the telephone conversations
Yeah.
between these parties, which was also a limited number of telephone conversations that they had looked at,
Yeah.
there was no evidence. But
So they're just talking about those particular bits.
those particular bits don't reveal any kind of
Collusion.
not collusion, I mean conversation between the two parties.
Where you can have definite proof.
We can link it to the bond issues.
I see. But that's only talking about very specific things like some of the recordings.
Recordings that were made available to
That
them.
were made available. Right. They make that point.
They had not been supplied with all
the evidence.
all the telephone conversation which had taken place between.
Isn't that wrong?
No, I mean that is how the auditors word it for us. Auditors always word it that based on the information that has been supplied to us.
We are all familiar with that.
But of course there is the huge outside that information said there is a huge amount of things that would have happened, and auditors didn't have access to that large volume of information, and therefore anyone who has to look at that particular conclusion will have to conclude, infer for us that it has actually happened subject to the particular limitation.
Right.
But if you look at the rest of the report, report number 4, it actually gives detailed information about the nexus among all the people who had been involved in the particular bond. Indeed.
Right. Now then, on Newsline Live, we encourage you to send us your questions by SMS. 0772 300 305. Send us your questions by SMS to 0772 300 305. Do you like the cup of tea there?
Exactly. It's very, I have really tasted the real Ceylon tea.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Shall I pour you some more?
Yes, exactly.
Because, our colleagues at Jones have very kindly given us these things. Wait till I send them the bill. But, there you go. It looks nice and rich and golden here. I'm sure no one will begrudge me taking a few seconds to promote our national drink. Tea, Ceylon tea. Nothing quite like it. Now then, I must ask you this question. We've spent around 300 million.
275 plus additional services provided by the central bank to
which is not monetized.
Yeah. Right. It has not been monetized.
They have not been monetized. Okay. Now then, so it's safe to say that the real cost is probably 300 million.
Yeah. Maybe even more.
Maybe even more. We're not going to argue about that because then we'll lose sight of the rest of it. Now, it's like this. After having spent so much of money, they seem to be only quoting you. They're saying, I'm talking about the nexus or the relationships that Governor Cabral had. So this is in the 2008 to 14 period. They're quoting you. They're saying that, well, it's up to the authorities to have a look to see whether Governor Cabral was compliant in governance issues by various relatives who are here, there and everywhere. There's some at Equity, some here, some at HMB, Commercial Bank, and so on and so forth. And even at PTL, well, or not PTL, but in a company related to PTL, the holding company. But surely we didn't spend around 300 million just to read what you said.
Yeah, I mean, Faraz now...
So what's the real story?
Well, they had actually produced a family tree connecting the former governor, Mr. Cabral, to various people who have been working in the financial sector.
Yeah.
And just that family tree won't help us to identify whether there had been irregularity that had happened, because for us to know whether Mr. Cabral had influenced the decisions which the central bank's monetary board would have made during that period to favor his relatives, the further studies have to be done. I think the forensic auditors had failed to summon the monetary board members at that time.
But they spoke to you. They spoke to people.
They spoke
in
to
the
me.
central bank.
Yeah, they spoke to me because they spoke to me to find out actually the rationale behind various things that we had done in the central bank, but not regarding that particular issue. I mean this particular type of this conflict of interest that the auditors have found, I think they had to prove that Mr. Cabral had, in all fairness to Mr. Cabral, I am just telling this, had influenced the monetary board.
You mean we have to try and compare him with what the Commission of Inquiry found out about Governor Mahendra?
I mean that
because that was very
completely different for us.
Yeah, because that was black and white. They said, look, he did, this information did go from him. So, are there instances of that with...
Well, no, I mean, I had worked with Mr. Cabral till 2009, and during that period, it didn't occur to me, because as a very senior officer of the central bank, that he had influenced the monetary board members, because I was at the monetary board when the decisions were taken, monetary board members to favor any particular company during that period. And also I have to mention here, Faraz, about this conflict of interest which the forensic auditors have found. There is this star worker in the central bank called Dr. Asim. You may remember he is the one who stopped from Mr. Mahendran from going for this 20 billion along with Mrs. Deepa Siniviran.
Absolutely.
Now these particular people have found a CV in the desktop computer of Mr. Asim of his wife, where one of the referees had been a director of an investment company belonging to a commercial bank which was running a primary dealer company also. And they are trying to establish, I mean, project that Mr. Asim had been connected to this particular primary dealer, which is a completely hilarious thing. So likewise the family tree of Mr. Cabral, which they have presented here, would have been valid or relevant for the analysis had they gone into further details and found out from the members of the monetary board at that time whether in their opinion Mr. Cabral was influencing the decision making process.
Now I'm going to have another cup of a sip of my tea. Please help yourself because it's fine tea from Jones. Now then, I come to the other point. I'm not really concerned about Mr. Cabral's relatives being here, there and everywhere, because the only sort of evidence, if you like, or the supporting document, if you want, of a better word, appears to be that they interviewed you on it, as though you were the authority. I'm going to leave that, because the more important question is this. Why is it that I think it says 90% of the bonds issued during the pre-2015 period, or let's get to the point, during the Cabral years, was 90% was done by something called direct placement. And it appears, that's one question, so direct placement. The second one is that in several of these instances, the weighted average rate at which the bonds were advertised and then handed over to, by direct placement, to selected dealers was higher, that rate was higher than the secondary market for similar maturities. Can you explain two things there then? First of all, why direct placements?
Well, we'll have to look at the economic conditions of the country after 2005 onwards for us, because the government was fighting a war. The budget deficit was actually very high, it's about 8% of GDP. And the amount of foreign funding which the government was taking was actually coming down. For example, in 2007, the foreigners had invested in government securities, treasury bonds, about 70 billion rupees, which came down to 2 billion rupees all of a sudden. So there was no any way for the government to finance its budgets by resorting to foreign funding. They had to completely depend on the domestic market to raise that money where the government budget deficit had increased.
Okay, but the Monetary Board had agreed that these direct placements would be offered to the so-called captive funds. That means the state funds, like, you know, anything to do with the state. NSB, Bank Ceylon, EPF, that kind of thing. Captive funds. That's what the Monetary Board had agreed.
Well,
but since February 2008
yeah.
and December 2014, the primary dealers were also offered these the direct placements at the weighted average rate, but significantly there appears to be a lapse. No, there was a lapse, and that lapse was that the Monetary Board seemed to have gone to sleep. Neither did they confirm that they could do this, give permission to the central bank, nor did they actually raise this matter up for 6 years.
Well, Faraz, that particular contention that the public debt department cannot place these direct placements with non-captive primary dealers is wrong, because in 2002,
Right.
there's a gazette notification issued by Minister Choksi as
Right.
finance minister, permitting public debt department to make these direct placements with anyone.
There you go.
Any-
So
any
that's why the
There's a-
2002 was important.
Yes, yeah, very important. And because this particular gazette notification had been ignored by the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, it had been ignored by the forensic auditors, and it had been ignored by everybody.
Why didn't you, was it not possible for you to bring it up? at
I
the
brought it
Presidential
up.
Commission?
I brought it up at the Presidential Commission of Inquiry. I brought it up even with the forensic auditors, that there was this legal permission given by the Minister of Finance in terms of the Government Securities Act.
The RSSO.
Yeah, RSS. So the Registered Stocks and Securities Ordinance.
Yeah.
And so therefore the Monetary Board's decision in 2008 was not for that Faraz.
Right.
Monetary Board decisions for something else. It has decided on the yield structure.
Yeah.
And in past they had, mentioned in their approval that they can place it with the captive sources.
Right.
In fact, about 96% of the things had been placed with the captive sources and not with the other people.
Right.
Yeah. Now, for example, even the forensic auditors have found that the losses that they say that has incurred during that period, which is wrong.
Yeah.
I will contest the methodology that they had used.
Yeah.
96% of the losses had been gains of the Employees Provident Fund up to 61%, Bank of Ceylon, People's Bank, and the National Savings Bank.
Yeah.
And it's only 4% of the losses, according to their calculation, had been gained by the non-state sector.
But what is the point, what is the comparison point that they have used to calculate the loss?
Yeah, that is again the methodology that they have used is completely wrong for us, because in a market, prices change from a minute to minute.
Right.
And also the same product you may have to sell at different prices to different people at different times. So their calculation, their assumption has been that if you have a particular bond,
Yeah.
you have to sell that particular bond at the same price throughout. You
Which
can't
is
do
not,
it.
that's just
no, I
not
mean it's not a market. I mean in every market now, if you go to a poller,
Yeah.
village poller Faraz, you find the goods are at a very high price at the start of the poller.
Yeah.
But at the end of the poller, if you go there, the prices are different from what you found in the morning.
Yes.
So can you say that, for example, suppose your wife has gone to the market and bought, say, potatoes at 100 rupees per kilogram in the morning.
Yeah.
And in the afternoon when you go to market, you have bought those potatoes for 50 rupees per kilogram. Can you say that your wife has brought 50 rupees loss to your house? No, because that was the price that was prevailing in the market at particular point of time.
Right.
So when the central bank, public debt department, people had to sell these bonds to prospective investors, their job for us is to get the full amount subscribed by the primary dealers.
Indeed.
And they had to now, if the total requirement is 10 billion, they will offer 5 billion at a given price, at a certain price to the people who come to the market immediately. The balance 5 billion
At the weighted average.
maybe at a particular price. I am not going to say it's weighted at a particular price.
Okay.
Then when it comes to filling the gap, you have to offer it at a different price in order to induce those investors to come and buy those bonds.
In simple speak, what it means is that if the price in the market, which is of course the secondary market, that's the general market.
Yeah.
If the price, let's say for various bonds expiring in 10 years or whatever, whichever maturity, for the sake of this argument, let's say that in the secondary market, the general market, if the rate of a particular bond was, let's say, 10%, and everybody was, one of the primary dealers had bought it and then put it into the secondary market for trading, it was trading 10% as what the central bank's paying you, so he's keeping his margin and selling it on.
That is exactly what is expected of primary dealers.
That's what is expected.
They have to make a market.
But now, at the same time, whilst this 10% business is already in the secondary market, the government treasury operations say, hello, we want another 5 billion and we want it in the next 5 days. All right? So what does the central bank do? Do they offer it at 10% because that's what is there in the secondary market, or do they try and induce it by offering a higher rate?
We'll have to qualify here, Faraz. There are no market prices available in the secondary market immediately to central bank or any other person. Because what has been published by the central bank as the secondary market things are simply the maximum price at which a particular primary dealer is willing to buy, and the maximum price at which a particular primary dealer is willing to sell.
So these rates, how do you all know this? At the central bank,
these are reported to central bank every day, and because we get it from 16 primary dealers.
What time do you get this?
We get it in the morning. In the morning we get it. That's the maximum price that they are willing. I mean, this is not the price at which the exact transaction has taken place.
No, this is their buying and sell
they
price.
Are buying and selling quotes.
Right.
And what the central bank does is that public department does is they take out all these spurious outlying prices, and the balance they average it by using the simple average system, and that is the one that is available in the market, not as an exact price, as an indicator for people to know the level of the price, and also the direction to which the market is moving, whether it is going down or going up. So as a result, this particular reference to this way, the prevailing market price in the secondary market for conducting market trades by the central bank public debt department is a completely erroneous thing, because public debt department people, what they have to look at is whether they would be able to raise the entire amount of money which the government wants. Because because the central bank job is to do it, to raise the funding requirements of the government at the cheapest price possible.
The least cost
method. It doesn't seem that they have to refer to the prevailing market price in the secondary market and then look for it. What they do is they look at the particular demand, because when they ask the primary dealers at what price you want to buy from the primary market, they will quote a price. So then they compare all those prices and then they place it with the people who are willing to pay the lowest price possible.
I see. Several questions, many of them are surrounding the issue of the family tree of Mr. Cabral. And one says here, does Dr. Wijewardene agree that Ajit Niwad Cabral, through his sister, manipulated the bonds issue in favor of Perpetual Treasuries Limited beyond the bond scam?
Well, I think even the forensic auditors have not found any evidence to prove that.
Right. Okay. And what about the entrust? Now, when it comes to entrust, that's a that's a veritable disaster.
It is a
because
disaster.
I read through this number 5 for a report 5, and I was amazed. It had A, B, C, D, E, F, G, yes, 6 or 7 points. Complete departure from process. The certificate of incorporation wasn't there. The articles of association, before that, articles of association not there. The certificate of incorporation is not there. The letter of undertaking from the board to indemnify and so on, that was not there. All the most basic stuff wasn't there, but yet they got a license.
Well, for us, that is actually one of the black marks for the Monetary Board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. One thing is that they had not been a proper...
But isn't the Monetary Board, they're not sitting down checking all this?
Exactly. The Monetary Board had to be, supplied with the required information by the people who had supervised the entrust. Entrust fiasco is a black mark, which actually should end up in criminal prosecution of the people.
About 2 billion rupees of the Ceylon Electricity Board's fund was lost.
Total loss is 11 billion.
Yes, but 2 billion just for the CEB.
There are certain internal funds of the central bank also which had invested in the entrust securities in the secondary market.
Who took those decisions to invest in
that?
That
is the problem. I mean, these are actually things that would have happened, and immediately when the Monetary Board had come to know about it, the board would have taken action against it in order to prevent it. And at the same time, these things should have been revealed in the market, and also the board would have taken action to take it, because that's a black mark. I mean, and it is actually something about which the central bank cannot be proud of.
I see. Well, with 6 minutes more left in this, and I really have to say this. This entrust business happened during the governorship of Mr. Cabral.
Yeah, it actually happened.
Can we blame him?
Not only him. I mean the Monetary Board, along with actually all the members of the Monetary Board should take the collective responsibility for that.
But but what were the officials of the central bank doing? How can they pass this application with so many documents?
That is why,
even if you want to open a bank account, I mean, it's like opening an account without your ID card. Any boy or girl out there who's 18 years old, just about starting their working life, will know that you need your ID card. So the company needs its certificate of incorporation.
Yeah, I mean that's why I said it's a black mark for us, and nobody can say that they are free from the guilt.
Right.
Yeah.
Now then, just looking at the figures. Now the Presidential Commission inquiry said the EPF lost about 8.5 billion, 8,500 million. What does the forensic report say?
Forensic audit report has actually calculated some numbers for us, but problem is that they had used the wrong price to...
The wrong benchmark.
Wrong benchmark, which they call the base price.
Yeah.
Which had been extracted from the quotes that the...
Why have they done that?
Because there are no any other price available. In my view, for us, they wouldn't have actually attempted at calculating it, because you can't calculate the loss without the proper price. And when they interviewed me, when they were conducting this particular forensic audit, I told them, you can't depend on the quotes submitted by primary dealers, because that is not the actual price available in the market. And based on that hypothetical price, you can calculate the losses, because the price which the primary dealers are quoting is actually an indicative price. It will give us the level of the market, but not the actual price that is prevailing in the market.
Now, also I want to ask, and this is a question that several people are putting forward. Now, when you all did this direct placements in the pre-2015 years, when you did the direct placement, you had the weighted average index, or the rate, and you came up with a figure. Who decided which primary dealer to give it to?
Well, it is done by the front office of the Public Debt Department.
So would they ordinarily call, I think at that time they would have been 13 or 14.
No, 16, yes.
16 eventually at the end.
Yeah.
But during that period, let's say 16.
Yeah.
Who decided? Did you call all 16 of them, or did you?
Well, they are supposed to do that for us because, you know, when it comes to selling the output to various primary dealers, the task is given to the front office of the public debt department.
Right. So what do? They sit down and telephone each
Yeah,
of
yeah, they are
them?
telephoning. They have to telephone.
But this telephone record is not even recorded.
At that time the central bank had not actually, the voice recording system had not been installed in the central bank at that time.
Goodness me, they can spend 2 million on a jacket, but they can't spend a few million on that.
I mean, this is again another lapse in the central bank's management, for which I think all of us will have to take responsibility. And
I wish I'd listened more carefully to the late Joan Munisinger. Joan always told me that we must look at the central bank, because she always maintained that Mahendran on his own couldn't have done all this, that there were various hiccups.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the front office people would have telephoned all these people and then found out the availability of funds, and they had actually agreed on a particular price and then settled the transaction. That's how it happens.
There are several more questions that begs an answer. But the forensic report is only a forensic report. It doesn't make any reference to the recovery process. Or does it? How can we recover? Can we recover any of this
now
monies?
we can't recover far. I mean, the problem is that those are all tradable.
Yes, but I'm saying, what about the Commission of Inquiry?
Yeah, that part you can do. That you can do. I mean, post 2015.
So then all this business about Mr. Cabral's direct placements and all that, nobody can be held responsible.
No, I mean, there had been, I mean, no any actual loss that you can calculate precisely in order to pass the responsibility to any particular person who would have been involved in this particular thing, because the prices that had been used by the forensic auditors are all fictitious, assumed prices.
Assumed prices.
Yeah. So with the assumed prices, you cannot calculate the exact amount of the loss. But at the same time, the post 2015 one, what the Attorney General has, you know, indicted all these people is for missing and avoidable loss. Avoidable loss of, you know, 688 million, and that is.
What does that mean? That means on that day, at that moment.
Yeah, at that moment they could have avoided it by having a better method of issuing the treasury bonds, which to meet the government's entire financial requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Now then, we've run out of time.
Yeah.
But to carry on the saga of the bond scam and the issuance of bonds and everything else, and where the whole country seems to have been captivated by the greatest scam ever inflicted on independent Sri Lanka, Newsfirst has another program. It's called Face the Nation. It's live tonight on TV1 at 9:30, where Mr. Shami Rasuddin will be asking the questions, and there'll be a panel of discussion, and Dr. Wijewardena has kindly agreed to be on that program too. So, live, TV1, 9:30 tonight. But in the meantime, Dr. Wijewardena, thank you so much for coming on Newsline.
You are welcome.
I know that this is, in your busy schedule, this is a great contribution from you. Thank you, and thank you.
Okay.
And that's the way it was at Newsline Live this morning. Do take care. Have a wonderful week ahead. And of course, God bless.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shauketaly.